So this is the Mary Sue. It's entitled, Is There Anything Funnier Than Josh Hawley Writing a Book About Masculinity?
Yeah, you guys writing a book about masculinity.
I just want to say something about Josh Hawley. He is, to my knowledge, the first American politician, at least in recent memory, that did a whole presentation, a whole speech about men and what men need. To be frank, and I think this is why I think it's worthy of some credit or praise, it's not a popular thing for politicians to stand up for men.
Popular. Okay, Brian, popular. Okay. Yeah. I think that's understating it.
Yeah.
Like, this is literally the first politician in living memory. Probably the first politician in a generation, our parents and their parents, that has ever advocated for anything to do with men.
So I want to look a little briefly at what this book is. It's entitled Manhood, the Masculine Virtues America Needs. Overview. A free society that despises manhood will not remain free. The American founders believed that a republic depends on certain masculine virtues. Senator Josh Hawley thinks that they were right. In a bold new book, he calls on American men to stand up and embrace their God-given responsibility as husbands, fathers, and citizens. No republic has ever survived without men of character to defend what is just and true. Starting with the wisdom of the ancients, from the Greek and Roman philosophers to Jesus of Nazareth, and drawing on the lessons of American history, Hawley identifies the defining strengths of men, including responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership. As Theodore Roosevelt declared, the very existence of the state depends on the character of its citizens. I am for business, but I am for manhood first. Hawley shows why the foolhardy assault on masculinity in education, the media, the workplace, and every level of government is an assault on freedom itself. Practical, down-to-earth, and urgent, Manhood, the Masculine Virtues America Needs is required reading for every American patriot. Is there anything funnier than Josh Hawley writing a book about masculinity by Vivian Kane of the Mary Sue? They say, write what you know. But apparently no one ever gave Josh Hawley that advice because the terrible Republican senator from Missouri is reportedly writing a new book about, and they put in quotes, masculinity.
Oh, scary.
What's really interesting is that feminine individuals, they think that masculinity is performative. So if they think that they're angry, which
like you crush beer cans on your forehead, you arm wrestle everyone.
And you're crass and you get in people. They think that that's masculinity because in many cases, feminine individuals see personal expression in terms of performing and other people's opinions. They don't realize that true masculinity is about seeing how your actions in the greater world. It's not performative, it's explorative in a lot of ways.
Now, obviously, masculinity is a multifaceted social construct. So it's not just that Josh Hawley doesn't have it. It isn't real because it's a social construct.
So since feminists basically have locked down the center of the chessboard when it comes to the common perception of male and female, you are constructing the social construct, and the social construct you're constructing is that men are to blame for everything and that masculinity is toxic.
My brain hurts!
So the only way that men can differentiate themselves from women is to become horrible people. Congratulations, feminism, you are what you fight.
But Hawley's idea of the concept is not. It is rooted entirely in aggressive, brute force notions of, quote, manhood, end quote, which, it just so happens, is the title of his book.
Can we go back to the summary, and could you read out the features of masculinity that he's looking at?
Hawley identifies the defining strengths of men, including responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership.
Don't fart in our face and say it's Rosewater. You're lying your ass off about what this is.
And given that the thing he's probably known best for at the moment is fleeing from violent protesters he pretended to support until he got scared, they're referring to January 6th. His attempt to cash in, pretending to be an expert on his own warped version of masculinity, is objectively hilarious. Now, in a way, though, she's also kind of shitting on masculinity, too, because she's trying to say that a real man wouldn't have done that.
She's saying that Hawley is not showing
responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership
in the face of fear. That's what she's accusing him of.
Yeah, and she's using it to discredit him as a man.
Masculinity.
Right.
So literally, she's using his framework to judge him as a man. Well, you just proved his point, Vivian.
Failure.
According to the Kansas City Star, Hawley's book, titled Manhood, the Masculine Virtues Americans Need, is based on a speech he gave at a conservative conference last year in which he essentially blamed feminism and the left, a nebulous yet all-encompassing entity, for all of men's problems. According to him, these things are to blame for driving men, quote, into the enclave of idleness and pornography and video games, end quote.
You're blaming men for constructing a patriarchy for the benefit of themselves over women. And you don't see how that would lead to men opting out of the system. Isn't that what you want? Like you're saying, men, you see that thing you're doing, it's bad for women. And the men are going, okay, well, I guess I'll stop contributing to society since that's bad for women. Yep. And then you're like, oh, how can they blame us for that? How? Because you're telling men to do it.
Yeah.
Like,
what more do you want from me?
After years of being told they are the problem, that their manhood is the problem, why would men not turn to these things, Hawley asks. A major thought line of Hawley's speech is the inability to separate masculinity from toxic masculinity, which he, of course, doesn't even believe is real. She wants to be able to say masculinity doesn't really exist, but bad masculinity does. Yeah.
But bad masculinity does. And that's a social construct. But we can't talk about how if men are being forced to be villains, that actually makes them twice the victim of women.
That means he sees all criticism of toxic masculinity as an attack on men in general, and claims that it's that criticism that creates men's destructive behaviors to begin with. Well, first of all, they're not destructive. They could be self-destructive, but they're not destructive. It all feels very similar to the white nationalist quote, if you're going to call me racist, then I have no choice but to act racist line of reasoning.
No. Well, first of all, that's not white nationalist. It's just the average human being who's just totally shutting down from your narratives of calling everything racist. It's like, if you're going to call me racist for doing something that has nothing to do with race, but actually, if I think about it, just impacts your bottom line and your control over everything, well, then I'm just going to go ahead and ignore your opinion.
That's my opinion!
Here are some other points from Hawley's nonsense speech that we can probably expect to be expanded into full chapters. Men are getting married less and at older ages. They're apparently being driven from higher education and even the military. Meanwhile, he is staunchly opposed to opening up the draft to women because he sure has a lot of opinions about an institution that he's never taken part in.
What are you saying here, Vivian? Oh my God, Hawley is not toxically masculine.
I'm a motherfucker gentleman.
Why are these things happening? You guessed it. It's because the left insults men too much. Obviously, he gets into anti-trans rhetoric, claiming the existence of trans athletes is an assault on womanhood and part of a non-existent war on gender, which is also somehow still really just about men. As far as the trans thing goes, I don't really care that there are men playing or trans women in women's sports or, using their bathrooms, because I think that they created the conditions for this to happen, and now they have to deal with the mess that they've made. But what I don't like is that it's being framed in an anti-male way, as though the real problem is that it's men that are in women's spaces. and this is something that I've proposed, is that more men identify as women because they don't want to identify as men because of how severely we've demonized men and masculinity. So why would they want to be men? Where would he get that idea?
I had a sex change operation. My penis is now a vagina, and I'm experiencing womanhood for the first time in my life.
According to Hawley, basically everything he doesn't like, from vaccine mandates to over-medicating children to outsourcing labor to foreign countries, all falls under the umbrella of a war on men waged by the left. If Hawley's book is anything like the speech it's reportedly being based on, it will alternate between fact-free fear-mongering arguments featuring either real but random and totally inconsequential strawman figures who happen to say something critical about men once, and vague, threatening culture war hypotheticals that don't actually exist. The culture war is not real, guys. I look forward to never reading this book.
The culture war is the belief that this culture needs to change because there is a problem with it, and that is that people are racist, sexist, and homophobic and transphobic. So what you're saying is we don't actually think the culture needs to change because there are people who oppose that message, not necessarily because they want racism, homophobia, transphobia, but because they think that the solution to those ills is on a social level, not a government regulation level, and not on the level of giving huge amounts of funds to NGOs to do nothing. You are part of a thought sphere that believes that men's primary action in the universe, what they are primarily defined by, is destructive to women. Your entire existence is defined by criticizing men, Vivian. I bet if we looked at your life, the majority of your conscious and subconscious thoughts would be about criticizing men for something. This is a confused mess, which is what really aggravates me. She appeals to the very virtues that Hawley has.
Responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership.
In order to shame Hawley for not having them. And here's the thing, women have a powerful effect on men's identities. You want men to internalize the notion that their actions in society are constructing a society for their own benefit at the expense of women. What do you think is going to happen from that? It's obvious.
Yep.
Something's got to give. Either men's mental health or society. And considering that men are primarily responsible for funding and running society, that is basically the same thing.